To me, to be a successful engineer, you need to have strong enterprise skills. It's not just being able to know the technical work that you're doing, but it's also just as important to be able to communicate and talk through the problem or talk through the solution with the people that you're working with. As a structural engineer, on a daily basis, we're speaking to and working together with mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, architects, builders, contractors, a whole group of people that may not necessarily have the technical knowledge in the certain space that I work in the same way that I'm not going to know the technical from a mechanical or electrical engineer. So it is so important to be successful, to be able to communicate in a way that others can understand, and vice versa. So the development of these enterprise skills, to me, is critical to being a successful engineer. And I had the opportunity to learn those at university, but more so learning through volunteer work and actually getting involved with groups such as Engineers Australia to provide an opportunity to further develop and challenge these skills.
To be honest with yourself, honest with your expectations, honest with your application. You know, I've interviewed a lot of graduates over the years, part of a graduate program, and it's about setting clear expectations for both yourself and both for the employer as well. The other thing I'd like to add is don't be afraid when you're going for your first job to take on like a 6 month secondment or a small short-term opportunity. I tend to find, especially in the water industry, is that 6 month position turns into a 6 year opportunity for that individual. I can see Amy's having a bit of a giggle. I'm guessing it's the same in most areas. You know, like when we find a really good individual or a really good engineer, managers have a knack for finding additional, I suppose, resources to be able to fund that individual for a little bit longer than expected. So, yeah, don't be afraid to get your foot in the door by taking on that, you know, short-term role. It also gives you a lot of exposure to different opportunities as well. So it might not be in the area of this area of discipline, like you might be taking on another role in, you know, another area, but it's always an opportunity to learn and grow.
Often it's the small volunteering opportunities, the competitions, the little things that come up, you know, events like this, EA events that you want to be involved in, which, you know, you meet lots of people and it moves from one thing to the next, and you know, you sort of become more involved in the industry while you still might not have your first job. And it's that case of how can you get industry experience without having industry experience? Well, it's these kind of events and those kind of you know, interactions on the periphery of having your job that I think, you know, set you up for being a good candidate.
Get onto some areas where engineers are. So LinkedIn is a great example. Engineers Australia is a great example, and reach out and network as much as you can. If there's somebody in the industry, you know, send them an email, see if you can catch up for a coffee, or, you know, reach out to them and say, hey, look, you know, I'm looking for maybe a placement opportunity or some interview opportunities to do some research or do some work. So just reach out and network as much as possible. You know, everyone's got time to answer an email or receive a phone call. So just reach out to everyone you can. Don't be shy. Everyone's got a busy life and a busy lifestyle, but reach out as much as you can, and I'm sure it'll pay dividends in the long run.
A student, whether a final year student or any year student who lacks experience, there are multiple ways of, I guess, sort of replicating the environment of a professional engineer, and that's through extracurricular activities. So volunteering, participating in competitions. I think Oscar was mentioning, we've developed case competitions for the past 2 years at Engineers Australia, where students will be developing skills that are essential generic enterprise skills, things like time management, teamwork, planning. These are clearly on the top of the list of graduate employers, and we see that in surveys. So extracurricular activities, I think, are really important for students. And just as Fikret mentioned, obviously your network. So attend as many events as you can, in person or online through LinkedIn. There are multiple ways, but obviously try to choose quality over quantity, and make those meaningful connections. But there are multiple ways to gain experience, even if it's not the traditional, internship. Choosing quality over quantity, try to be as relevant as possible. So when you're reaching out to somebody directly, somebody you may not know, try to put a bit of context into it. So let's say, Amy, it was great to see you at the Dream Your Engineer Career event with Victoria University. I loved your comments on this, that, etc. I find you're a noteworthy person. I'd like to learn more from you. Just try to put context into when you're reaching out to these people. It's much more difficult being online, but we'll soon be back in person. So yeah, just try to make a personalized approach to somebody when you're networking, and not just those generic emails, I guess. Hi, Xavier, I'd like to have you in my network. Things like that.
There's LinkedIn being so accessible, you do get a lot of requests, and the context really does help to say, I saw you speak at this event, or we were both at that event. We have a similar interest. Are you able to connect, or ask a question and start the conversation? Because just saying, hi, I'm a graduate, that's fantastic, but there are 100 other people saying, hi, I'm a graduate. So you've got to give some context, start that conversation, and open it to further discussion. Because when it's online, it is quite hard, and I do feel for the fact that you can't get out there and meet people face to face and look them in the eye and shake their hands. The other thing, as Fikret was saying, is just get the experience and reach out to people and find out what internship opportunities there are, either while you're at university, between university years. I actually did 2 placements while I was at university, and that helped me to get my graduate scheme. But even if it's post-university, if you've graduated, there's still internship opportunities. People are always interested in free labor. So just reach out to them and say, can we do 3 months of 2 or 3 days a week, just so that I can get some experience? And then you start to build that network, and then you can meet people in the office and then start reaching out to them through LinkedIn.
Know who you are, what your value is, and be authentic. That's how you'll differentiate yourself. So show you know what your worth is, you know who you are, you know how you want to portray yourself to somebody. Well, be authentic. That way you'll for sure differentiate yourself.
I would add further to that, when you reach out to people that I guess have quite a large network, and I know Amy would be in a similar position, but you do get messages on a regular basis, and it's sometimes I get a message because I think someone just would like to be connected and not necessarily be connected with you. So it's also about making sure you reach out to people that you do actually want to connect with, not just, I heard you speak, it sounded good, I think you'd be a good person that I should know, rather than, okay, what is it that I actually said that you connected with? So it's just adding that extra level. And I know, like, from a personal standpoint, I don't accept anyone on LinkedIn anymore unless they send me a message or I know who they are. And that's just a general rule that I personally have. So yeah, definitely personalize the message and make sure you're reaching out to people that you actually want to connect with, and not just because you think they would be good to know.
You can't get experience without experience, and this was really the case for me and plenty of others when I was studying. So I think, like I said, competitions in that sense brought like minds together and brought motivated people who wanted to get that experience and build those enterprise skills, as Xavier was talking about before, in a group, in a sort of format centered around a problem. So for me, that was a really, fantastic way to actually, get experience working in with some pretty exciting projects. We, had particular competitions in the university I was in, but also multi sort of collaborative projects where it was different universities all working together. Doesn't have to be universities in Victoria or Australia. It can be internationally, and looking for these opportunities and getting together and just signing up and seeing what happens. It might not be, perfectly aligned with where you think you're going to end up, but maybe that's a great outcome that you can build skills in a different area, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot from it. So in terms of pathway, I think that was a great one for me to work with some others. We undertook a competition in China and were able to go to China and get all the universities together to fund us to go and present at a big event, and presented a competition. And from there's plenty of people interested in the event, and you get all these opportunities from that. So and you meet lots of great people along the way. So I'd say that it's these kinds of things that it's not necessarily applying for a job, but it's building all of those skills so you're ready to go when the time is right. So I'd say that's probably a really good one if you're in university to look out for these. It might be a volunteering position, it might be a competition, it might be a hackathon. There's all different things out there that people run.
We are obviously at Engineers Australia encouraging employers, companies to attract or have a diverse engineering workforce. So it is also our part to educate companies, employers on the opportunities they have to sponsor international graduates. We also, on behalf of the Department of Home Affairs, we assess migration skills. So we can also, for those students who may have qualifications from overseas, we assess those. But the question is, I think, with those additional hurdles, international graduates need that network. Target also maybe smaller companies rather than the larger ones. They will also more often favor international candidates. It is difficult, but it's a question of also resilience. I have many good stories. Friends who are actually not engineers who have marketing and communications qualifications, and those aren't skills that are particularly lacking in Australia. And yet, with a lot of hard work and persistence, they find those sponsorship opportunities. So
there's a tendency within graduates or within graduating students to go for the big companies. And yes, there's definitely opportunities that big companies can provide. But for myself, I started at a smaller company, and it was so valuable to have a different experience, to have a smaller company experience. And as engineers, we have a skill set that's so highly valued in so many different areas, and it would be remiss to just focus on the big companies. I say that working at a big company now, but having been at a different company, there is so many opportunities. I had friends in my graduating class that went to Vic Roads, they went to North East Link, they went to Metro, they went to smaller residential construction firms, they went to your developers, your Lendlease, but there's so many different options. I had some that went to Deloitte and went in a completely different direction, but using their engineering degree in different ways. So I'd really encourage all students to, I guess, expand your horizons, and you can make the most out of every opportunity. And it's not just the big companies that can provide you life-changing experiences. So really explore what is possible.
all of the students at Victoria University are eligible for a free student membership because they're studying an accredited degree. All the bachelors of engineering that you had mentioned earlier. Just to touch a word on some of the resources that the students have access to, obviously all the webinars, all the networking opportunities that we have, albeit online at the moment, we will soon be in person. So really fantastic opportunities to build those networks. I really wanted to mention that we have just recently developed a virtual engineering work experience, so that you can find on the Young Engineers Australia website. These are actual modules that were developed by Engineers Australia employers and educators. And they're modules that take about from 2 to 5 hours to complete in 8 fields of engineering, so civil, electrical, mechanical, that you deliver. We have those modules, and you can start building skills like cost estimations, client communications, all sorts of skills. And I think that's a way of proving, in the current situation, we're developing virtual engineering work experience. I could go on and on. We have our own Netflix, practically EA on demand, where you can review conferences, webinars, review them for free. Multiple platforms, forums of discussion, mentor opportunities. There's even though we have a librarian who's available to give you access to statistics, technical journals, conference proceedings. There's really just a wealth of resources there, all for free for our students, because we want them to have a good experience and hopefully be engaged future graduate members and experienced members like we have today, Amy, Nicole, Oscar, Figret. That's in a nutshell, but I could actually do a whole presentation, an hour presentation on all we have available. So just encourage students to sign up. It's free, just go onto our website.
It directly connects to a lot of the companies I recruit for and work on behalf of. Is a lot of the most highly regarded candidates are referrals generally, and that doesn't necessarily that they have known these candidates for 10, 15 years and have are pretty much family with them. It can be as simple as they cut up for a coffee once, or they've known them from a couple networking events. They met up with them and they know who they are essentially. It's just that pretty much that first impression that you've made. So if you've got a massive network of tens and hundreds of first impressions, you're just giving yourself that better chance of leading to an interview based off of a referral rather than an application.
Don't see networking as a means to an end. See it as an opportunity to get to know people. See it as an opportunity to exchange ideas, to just have a genuine chat about what's happening in people's lives. And and it turns to work, sure, and it turns to industry, absolutely. But if you think about it that way, it's not so daunting. I think if you think about it in terms of, goodness me, I've got to create a network of 150 people in the next 3 events or something, it just becomes, it shouldn't be that. It actually, most people are there because they do want to, get to know other people and share views and see what's happening across different parts of the industry and look for opportunities to come together as, common-minded people. And that's a good thing.
Just staying up to date with, I guess, certain projects, where they're at, what the future holds, what types of projects in the energy industry. A lot of the times you can find out what companies are doing bids or tenders for certain projects, or sort of the early stage and sort of like feasibility of certain solar and wind farms, but similar across other projects, other construction industries as well. Just staying up to date with those kind of projects, and you can kind of relate it to where the skills might be in demand as well, and you can kind of touch up on certain courses like Amy was touching on before, just short courses, things like that, to stay up to date, stay relevant within the industry, around your knowledge, because things do change quite quickly within sort of 6 to 12 months time. The industry, sort of the demand can change for a certain skill set, so it's just being up to date, really knowing the industry, kind of like, so I guess some of the answers we've already had, but that's definitely one of the key things I would say.
Just basic things now, just verbal and written skills. It's common to find that as not a priority, sorry, amongst applicants at the moment. And yeah, I think just getting those basics right, you know, good written verbal communication when you aren't in a when you're in a virtual environment is extremely important. So yeah, just getting the basics right, I think.
As a recruiter, we try and obviously help as many candidates as we can, but not all the time. Maybe your skill set experience is very good, but not maybe completely relevant to some of the clients we do work with. Same with employers, maybe might not be the best fit for the immediate position. But I guess in terms of catch up with a coffee and catch up with them is similar to what you also said earlier, is maybe not have the ends, the means to an end. Don't see it as a means to an end. Just to maybe sort of catch up as like as an education piece for yourself, so try and pick their brain about the industry, or because as a recruiter, I'm always happy to sort of give advice around that or talk about the industry. A lot of people are happy to talk about themselves as well, so you can catch up with an employer or recruiter to see if they can talk about the industry for you, rather than just catching up with them because you want to get a job. So a lot of times, obviously, yeah, I'll try and catch up with people for coffee because I do have a job for them. But that's not always the case, and I'm assuming that's probably where the question leads to as well. So yeah, see if you can sort of pick their brains about something else, or use it as more as an educational piece, really, to catch up with someone.
Definitely. I think it's important to be conscious of people's time. I think we would all love to help as many people as we can, but yeah, I think it's not always possible, unfortunately. So that networking piece that we spoke about at the start is extremely important. Being involved in committees, events, mentoring programs are fantastic. And yeah, perfectly said, Connor, in terms of don't just reach out just to get a job, reach out to learn and connect and engage with the industry.
As a recruiter, LinkedIn it's amazing because it's your personal brand as well. So who you follow, people can see who you comment on, and really sort of establishing your own personal brand. But one of the biggest things is, you know, if employers are looking for a specific individual for a job, have as much detail as you can on your LinkedIn page, because as what we do as recruiters, we will type in, you know, 5 or 6 keywords on the LinkedIn entire search, and everyone's profile will come up who's got those keyword searches in. So that might be, you know, you might have worked with Linux, for example. You might not have got experience with that, but you've learned about it at university. Little things like that will actually get you on a recruiter's radar. So even, you know, talking about your degree, list the specific subjects, the softwares, you know, anything that you've worked on. Be as specific as you can.
I guess in terms of digital platforms, LinkedIn is definitely the giant right now, and the main sort of almost have a monopoly, I guess, in terms of professional profiles. But Seek's a big one as well, because you can actually create a profile on Seek, and recruiters and anyone who has a Seek license can, similar to LinkedIn, can do various searches and come across your profile. So same sort of thing. It's one thing that people probably don't keep up to date as often. You might only do it when you're looking for a job. But if you can keep an up-to-date Seek profile, same as your LinkedIn profile, you maybe come up more in more relevant searches for recruiters or employers as well.
Being passionate is really important. You know, being passionate for what you're doing, why you're there, and having done a bit of research about the company that you might be willing, you know, thinking about joining. Well, why are you doing that? Is it just a job, or is it actually because you're interested in something that company is doing with its strategy, or the impact it might be having in some way? You know, do a little bit of research and show that you are genuinely passionate. And I think the other thing is, you know, and we said be yourself, absolutely, but you know, at Arup we get 1,200 graduate interview applications every year, and you know, and like many companies, you cannot filter on the basis of just results. You start to then look for what makes this particular candidate special, interesting, different. So passion's important. The other thing is have a breadth of understanding about what are the key issues in industry, what's going on at the moment. what are your views? Have a voice. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about actually showing interest in providing commentary or having an opinion or having thought about, what's the future of digital in our industry? How does sustainable development actually look? Even if you might be an electrical engineer, what does that mean to you in terms of, what the future of sustainability does to your discipline? Again, you don't have to be, trying to solve the world's problems, but you do need to at least show some understanding of those sorts of challenges and say, you know what, I've got an opinion on that, or I want to learn more about it, or whatever it might be.
I'd probably just like to touch a little bit more on, I guess, the softer skills that really do make you stand out, like Joseph said, and Amy touched on as well. Obviously, your degree is extremely important. It is the foundation. It's, that technical foundation is the core of your career, but it is just the start of your career. You still continue to learn after you graduate. You're still, 3 or 4, 5 years, you're always learning as an engineer. So I just think the soft skills that make you stand out as a graduate, amongst others, because we're the same, we get a very high volume of applicants each year, so it's definitely not personal. Rejection, it does happen to everyone, it is very common, but you might fit into one organization and you might not align with another, so it's definitely not a personal thing. So be educated on terms of what culture that organization has and what are their values and what are the purpose, and really try and understand. I think be open at the same time, but be targeted in terms of the organizations that you're applying for, and really go in knowing something about them and why you've applied for that company.